Prime Minister Dean Barrow returned home from Washington, D.C. yesterday, along with the Financial Secretary Joseph Waite, Central Bank Governor Glenn Fortissigeri, and Ambassador Marcus Pat, following meetings with members of the U.S. banking sector. The delegation had meetings set up with the U.S. Comptroller of Currency, the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, and the U.S. Department of Treasury in an effort to discuss the banking woes that Belize is currently facing as they relate to correspondent banking. Prime Minister Dean Barrow called a press conference today in which he spoke firstly of the current status of Belize and the banking sector.
When our banks are facing the possibility of a cutoff of these relationships, you can understand how cataclysmic that would be in so very many ways for our country if it were to happen. I want to make clear that we're not nearly there yet. None of our domestic banks is at this moment completely without a correspondent banking relationship. What the banks do, they try to have correspondent banking relationships or local banks with a number of banks abroad. And already our local banks have lost some of those correspondent banking relationships, and there is an indication that those losses could continue.
The challenges being faced in the correspondent banking sector come as part of a de-risking movement by the U.S. banks and is said to be a part of an effort to minimize or eliminate any possible fines or sanctions against their institution by the U.S. regulatory bodies. Prime Minister Dean Barrow, in his meeting with the Comptroller of Currency, Thomas Curry, however, did note that there is no issue with the U.S. banks doing business with Belize, and that all in all, Belize does have a clean bill of health in the financial sector, and that the U.S. regulatory bodies may only be a scapegoat after all.
One of the good things about the meetings that we had in the U.S. is the confirmation that we got from every single regulatory authority with which we met that there is nothing wrong with the Belize jurisdiction. In fact, those authorities said to us, if any particular bank decides it doesn't want to do business in Belize, don't let that bank tell you that it is because of any pressure that we, the regulators in the states, have exerted upon them. Because we are fine with the Belize jurisdiction. Not saying everything is perfect, but those regulators are satisfied that our banks do all that they need to in order to preserve the integrity of the system, and they're satisfied that our financial intelligence unit, also from the point of view of the official side of trying to keep the jurisdiction sound, that our FIU does all that it should do, and they're satisfied that our central bank does all that it should do.
Despite the clean bill of health declared for Belize, there is still the need to ensure that relations are in place and transactions are done smoothly between the financial institutions in Belize and the United States. Prime Minister Barrow went on to say that there is a New York bank that will be pulling out of Belize in the near future. And coming out of his meeting with the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, it was found out that the bank's decision is not any indication of an unhealthy banking sector in Belize.
The OCC is regulator for thousands of banks, including a small bank out of New York that was doing one aspect of the correspondent banking business with us. And that bank has indicated that it will be pulling out in the not too distant future. We were very pleased to get the confirmation from the OCC that it didn't even know of the particular bank we're talking about that is now saying it will pull out. It's a small bank. The OCC regulates thousands of banks. The name was not immediately recognizable to them. But they gave us the assurance that if that little bank is pulling out, it cannot be as a consequence of anything said to it, hinted to it, signaled to it by the OCC, suggesting that, well, there is something a little bit shaky about the Belize jurisdiction.
As has been noted, the Belize delegation had found out that the de-risking movements are only precautionary on behalf of the U.S. banks and is not a reflection of a shaky Belize jurisdiction. However, there is the need for the government to minimize the impacts to its citizens and economy. And to that end, Prime Minister Dean Barrow says several moves have been made from both his end and that of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC.
But we met with the FDIC because there is a particular bank that the governor of the central bank and the individual banks in Belize have been talking to, seeking to start a correspondent banking relationship with that bank. And as I said, the FDIC is the direct regulator of that particular bank. We were able to get from the FDIC a replication of the message we received from the OCC. There is nothing wrong with the Belize jurisdiction. And in terms of this bank that we told them we were pursuing, which bank they knew right away because it's a big enough bank, they were able to assure us that they would actually transmit that message themselves to the bank, that the Belize jurisdiction is fine, and if your business model is such that you can make a profit from doing business with Belize, feel free to go right ahead and do that.
According to Prime Minister Barrow, the communication lines have been opened, with Central Bank Governor Glenford Isagiri being the primary contact for Belize with the United States officials. Reporting for Love News, I am Renee Trujillo.